Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley at sprinkledwithglitter.com and licensed designer with Spellbinders. I'm so thrilled you're here today. Today, I am here to share with you some tips and tricks about using the brand new Shine Bright cutting dies and coordinating layered Shine Bright stencils from my new Shine Bright collection. So let's get into the desktop and I'll show you a couple of tricks for lining up these stencils. Now here you can see the Shine Bright cutting dies, which include the words as well as the shadow layer, and the layered Shine Bright stencil set, which includes 5 stencils and 1 mask. Now we designed these stencils in a particular way on purpose. They're not numbered because you can use them in any order that you choose, and we've positioned them on the stencil to get the maximum use. So there are no kind of outer hash marks to help you line that up. Now that can be a little tricky for some of you, so I'm going to give you a couple tips for lining up these stencils perfectly every time. Now because these stencils do not have any outer A2 marks, you can use them on a vertical or a horizontal card. So the first way that I love to line up these stencils is by using a MISTI stamping tool or something with kind of a corner guide where you can slide your paper and your stencil every time and you know you're going to get perfect alignment. So you can start with any stencil in the set, and with your paper in the lower corner, or if you like the upper corner, you can use the upper corner as well. You can just slide your paper and your stencil into that corner and hold it in place with either some masking tape or your magnet. You can also use like a scoreboard or something like that. And then you can grab your inks and start inking your stencil. So I'm going to start out with some bright pink ink and just go over this stencil quickly. And there's a variety of ways that you can stencil with these stencils. You can add shading and different colors as you go down the stencil, or you can just kind of blend with one solid hand. I'm going to do this quickly today so that you can see all of these stencils in action. And with my first color done, I'm just going to go ahead and remove this stencil. Now I'm going to keep my paper in that lower right-hand corner because that's where I started. And then I can come in with a second stencil. As I mentioned before, it really doesn't matter what order you go in with these stencils. You just kind of want to look at the packaging and see where each of your colors is going to land. So when I place the second stencil, I'm going to make sure that I have it in that lower right-hand corner, and then I'm going to hold it in place. And I'm going to grab a blending brush and blend on my ink. Now I'm using a piece of cardstock that's larger than my card front. And what that means is that I can use this on a larger card, or I can trim this down to work on any size project that I want. And by positioning the rays in the stencil where we did, that means that you can create either a vertical or a horizontal card with these stencils and dies. And that was really important to me, that we had some versatility within these products so that you can use them in a variety of different ways. So I'm going to quickly do my inking on this stencil, and then we can move on to our third stencil. So I'm going to remove my magnet and remove my stencil, and I'll set that aside. And then we can move into stencil number 3. So once again, I'm just positioning this stencil into the lower right-hand corner. I'm going to hold it in place with my magnet, and then I'm going to bring in some ink and ink over this stencil as well. Keep in mind, stencils are a great opportunity to use all of those fun glitter paste, gels, solar paste, and lunar paste that you may have in your stash. You can also kind of pounce some embossing ink into the open areas of the stencil and cover those areas with embossing powder, and that's a great way to add a little more shine and dimension to your project. So we're done with the third stencil, and for stencil number 4, again, keeping my paper in this lower right-hand corner, I'm going to position my stencil in that lower corner and then hold it in place with a magnet, and I can bring in my final color and ink over this stencil. So you can see with this method, the positioning, the alignment, the inking really does go really quickly. And I will end up with a piece that I can either trim down and use on an A2 size card, or I can even create a larger scale card with that. I can also create a horizontal card as well. So this is stencil number 4. Again, they're not numbered, but it's the 4th stencil that I used today. And then I can either choose to use this stencil here to do something with that, maybe add a layer of shine over the entire thing, or I can grab the mask and position that over the stenciled area. So you'll see that this lines up perfectly with the stenciled area and that shine bright sentiment. I can hold that in place and then grab another color of ink and kind of create a fun little glow around this. So I'm just going to use a really light ink and add just a little haze around this. Now you could stencil the entire card front if you wanted with this mask in place, or you could even add your glitter or gel around the outer edge. But I thought this was really fun to include, to be able to kind of add some color and a glow around that stencil design as well. So let me show you what that looks like once you remove your mask. You have your entire stenciled design here, and then you can either use it with the coordinating dies or on its own to create a card project. Now, if you want to do your stenciling directly on your card front, you can actually use your dies to create an impression on your card and use that impression to help you align each of your stencils. Because these stencils don't have the A2 grid markings for you to line up with an A2 size piece of cardstock, this can be really helpful. And again, we didn't place those little outside guidelines on there because we wanted this stencil to be able to be used either horizontally or vertically. So in order to do this, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab the shine word die. So this is not the outside die or the shadow die. This is the actual word die. And I can position that wherever I want it on my card front. Keep in mind, you only want to use one of the words when you're doing this technique. And I prefer to use the shine die because it will then represent the top of my design. Now, in order to keep this in place as I'm doing my die cutting, I'm just gonna line it up on my card front and I'm going to hold it in place with some Best Ever Craft tape here and just kind of run it through my Spellbinders Platinum 6, but I'm going to use the sandwich where you create an impression or you emboss with a die. So I'm going to make sure that it's nice and straight on my card front, and then I'm going to use my A platform as well as my B platform topper. I'm going to position my die and my paper with the die blades facing up, and then I am going to use the E embossing mat and the D adapter plate on top of that and run that through my die cut machine. Now, we're not going to be doing any cutting with this. It's just going to create an impression with our die. So I'm just running this through here. And this is kind of a fun technique that you can use. And you can already see that I have that impression on my cardstock. So now that I have this impressed word on my card front, I can then do the stenciling directly onto my A2 size card front or my card base if I choose. And I will use this impressed area to help me line up my stencils. Now this may be hard to see on camera, but in real life it's a little easier to see. And you're just going to look through the stencil and make sure that the impressed areas are lining up with the top of the stencil where that shine will be on your card front once you stencil it. So I'm just looking to see that the bottom of these letters and the areas of these letters that I can see are lined up with those impressed areas, that they're kind of tucked behind there. And once I have everything in place, I'm going to use a magnet to hold this in place, and then I can do my stenciling. So I'll bring in my first color of ink and quickly add my ink to this stencil. Now for demonstration purposes today, I'm just quickly adding a layer of ink, but if you want to do some more in-depth inking techniques, you can definitely do that. I think both ways are beautiful. Now, once I have my inking completed on this stencil, I'm going to set it aside and move on to another stencil in the set. Once again, I'm going to make sure that the letters that I can see in that shine are kind of lined up with the impression or the outsides of the impressions that I've created. And you can kind of look through the stencil and just make sure the S is kind of nestled under there and the back side of the N, or this line of the N, is kind of aligned with your stencil. And then once again, hold it in place with some magnets. Now that I have it held in place, I'm going to quickly add my inking to the open areas. Now, once I'm done with this stencil, I can go ahead and set it to the side, move on to my next stencil. Again, aligning the back side of that S with the impressed area that I can see on my card front, and holding that stencil in place with either some tape or some magnets or whatever system you like to use in your craft room. And then I'm going to bring in this really beautiful citrine colored ink and ink over this stencil. Now keep in mind that you may want to mask off this upper area, or you will want to be very careful so that you don't get a line of ink across the top of the stencil. But really, we've positioned these words on the stencil to give you the most versatility. Now I'm moving on to the fourth stencil, which will complete the ray design. And once again, I'm just looking through the stencil to make sure that it lines up with the back side, or that it's masking off that E there. And once I have it in position, I'll just hold it in place again, and I'll bring my ink in and just start inking over those open areas. Once I have my inking completed, I can remove my stencil, and you can see I have a perfectly aligned stenciled design by using that impressed area. Now, finally, you can finish off this design by bringing in the mask if you choose, and you'll cover all those stenciled areas with your mask, and you can create kind of a glow around this stencil design if you choose. This is a total optional step, but I thought it was a fun way to bring a little more versatility to this set. So I'm just gonna bring in a real soft glow around these words, kind of add to that shiny feeling of these words. This looks great in like a soft orange or a light pink as well, or even like a soft sea glass color. And there I have my perfectly aligned stencils. Now from here, you can use the coordinating dies with this to create different designs. And if you want your bright word pressed in there, then what I would recommend doing is taking your bright die and lining it up with the stenciled area to create that impression over that stenciled design. I would not recommend using both of the dies from the beginning to create an impression, because it's nearly impossible to get the shine and the bright aligned perfectly where the stencil will fall on your paper. So just choose either the word shine or the word bright to create your initial impression so that you can line up your stencils. So there you have two different ways to align the layered Shine Bright stencils to get great results on any card project. I hope you enjoyed these tips and tricks and learning how to use the layered Shine Bright stencils. Thanks so much for joining me in my craft room today for these tips and tricks using Thank you so much for joining me in my craft room today for these tips and tricks featuring the brand new Shine Bright cutting dies and layered Shine Bright layering stencils from Spellbinders and Carissa Wiley. I'm Carissa Wiley at sprinkledwithglitter.com. Thanks for joining me today, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.